This is Suzanne Edwards, and this is my final assignment for Music 5301. And today I'm going to be doing the style analysis for Madonna Poco Dolce from the composer Nicola Vicentino. And he was born in 1511 and died around 1576. This is a composition by a Renaissance composer. So he composed this extreme chromatic piece based upon his study of ancient Greek theory, and he adapted it to modern practice. Vicentino was most famous for writing his treatise entitled L'antica musica ridotta alla moderna pratica, ancient music adapted to modern practice. So let's get into this piece. I will scroll through the piece so you can have a look at. Already you can see more flats, well, more sharps and naturals than any piece of this time, unless they were using musica ficta. But starting with the large dimension, it's a polyphonic composition. The text and music are punctuated by extreme chromaticism. You can see all these chromaticisms right here, like places we would have never seen them ordinarily. Look at right all over the place. Double sharps. Well, who wants to sing a double sharp? This piece is composed in the Dorian framework. So while he wasn't sticking to the Dorian mode, obviously, he was in the Dorian framework with the D as his, from D to D. So there are 6 phrases. We have phrase 1. Here we go. Phrase 1. Phrase 2 that goes from, so phrase 1 goes from here about to here. Phrase 2 goes all the way to here. And phrase 3 goes all the way into this next section. Phrase 4 is here. And then phrase 5 and on to phrase 6 all the way here, phrase 6. So it takes us all the way to the end. Related to the harmony, since he composed it in Dorian framework, though not exact, while he would be thought that he would be maybe moving through different modes, that's how he spoke of moving through. He would move through different modes internally, but the triadic D that keeps appearing says otherwise. I think he had a D in mind, so I think he really was staying within the Dorian framework. There are clear modulatory steps throughout. I'm going to go through and circle those modulatory kind of steps where he had some modulation that he was working on right here. And it would be at certain points that he would give us some sort of modulation. It sounds modulated, like he wants to take us to another key, but he doesn't actually take us there. The place where it happens a lot is like he's modulating through a whole section. It comes in the end. And, no, I was wrong. It doesn't come in the end. It's in the middle. I'm sorry. It comes right around here. So he takes us through all these key changes right here. And you can see what's happening. He takes us from a A diminished to a slightly B diminished to a B minor right here. There's all those. To a C sharp minor. There's the funkiest chord right in here. It would be a real jazz chord, but he wasn't jazz. His lowest, right here, we were back at D minor. And if I were a jazzer, this would be a C major in an inversion. But this is not jazz. So I know I kind of skipped around there for a second. His main thematic structure for melody, the soprano and the tenor alternate in the thematic material, creating a contrast. So the overall piece, the range, and the overall range of this piece is from G sharp, I'm going to put up here, G sharp to, it's down in the lower region, to D5. So what do I mean by he's alternating the thematic material? So we see that, for instance, in the beginning, we have soloistic lines happening. So all parts are singing more solo. And then when we get to coming up on the second phrase, the soprano and the alto are paired off. And the bass is paired off with them. And there are elongated tenor lines that are singing. And so this continual alternation of who is singing together, who's carrying the melody, while the other parts are paired off. There's a strong soprano lead here. So the tenor and the soprano, they alternate. It could be the recording that's making my ear maybe bend a little bit more to the tenor or soprano, but from what I hear and from what I see and from what I played, it does seem like the soprano sometimes leads and then the tenor sometimes leads. This piece is in alla breve, not cut time. We get the indication of a B flat. In this case, it doesn't mean that everything else is musica ficta, because otherwise the whole piece would be ficta, I think. On the one hand, I can say that it's free-flowing, but he's very, Vicentino is very, very, he has a very controlled nature about what he is writing. He's very, very specific. There's rhythmic change that's caused by the textual interplay between the voices in the phrases. And in phrase 4, I take you here to phrase 4. The words il troppo lungo pianto, which what he's saying is that translation is the translation on that word, that phrase is just before it says il breve riso, the brief smile, il troppo lungo pianto, the too long grief. So he really makes this whole section from let's change the color here. Change the color. Yellow. Okay. He's got this part right here where he's saying the brief smile. So that part is rather brief. If you look at it in section phrase 3, it's rather brief. The brief smile. And it's il brief, it's together, il breviso, together, il breviso, and then all together, il breviso, and then they go on to this part where they sing. They get through the pianto, they start to sing the pianto, and you can already see that it's a different color here. About red. It's beginning to be elongated. It's elongated, prolongated. These notes are hanging on, and then moving through all of these chordal changes, diminished changes, and minor changes through here, 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 and here, but still circling around the words that say il troppo lungo pianto. So, il troppo lungo pianto, right here. Which really, what he's saying is the too long grief. So I think that he really makes this very, very, it's the grief section. So anyway, let's continue. Related to one of the things that happens is that the tempo in this section, this same section, the tempo seems to change. Feels slower, a little bit like molasses. I didn't put that in my writing, but I'm saying it now. And it's only because I think that he's elongating all of these words so that he can stretch out the grief. And so now I'm going to go to the growth part of my large dimension. Can I say? So I wrote, through the chromaticism employed, there's a natural modulation that occurs and does an immediate triadic change that gives an immediate contrast. Absolutely. So wherever he does these modulations here, it changes. So we think, oh, it's going to be so sweet here, but all of a sudden it changes by here, and we're on to the next. Tonal qualities, modal tonal qualities, with his implied triad by his chromaticism. And also through this section here, this section definitely, there's an immediate contrast with those changes. As I said, he's kind of dancing around and circling around his pain in this section, and the prolongation of the pain. He just he contrasts it, and it does, in listening to it, there is a really definitely a big contrast in that change, in that section. Okay, and now I'm going to go to my large dimension on the movement side. Well, what can I say? Movement and the sound is infused with contrapuntal textures. Yes, harmonic and harsh. Harsh would be the name that he spoke about. He got harshness. Where were the harshness? Well, let me see. I can absolutely say it feels harsh here because pain is harsh, right? I don't think that he really tried to make it harsh. It was that all three of these genera that he wrote in, chromatic, diatonic, and harmonic, just created these harsh sounds. And strangely enough, when I listen to them enough, my ear has gotten more tuned to them. So by the 10th time of listening, I'm looking forward to these changes. It sounds like something that I might play on the piano with my movements of my chordal movements. So I want to point out that at the end of phrase 1, where's phrase 1? Where did it go? At the end of phrase 1, there is the peaks that I believe go up and then descend. So we see these peaks that happen, and directional changes that happen. Go to phrase 3. Here we go. Here's phrase 3. And phrase 3, it does the same thing. We begin to see here in this section tension. The tension is building. Soprano is really bringing in the tension in this part. And then when we get to this section here, so at the beginning, sorry, I'm going to go back. So there's a little bit of a canon effect right here that happens with these il breveriso. And I know that that comes up in further down in my essay, but so there's a little bit of a canon effect, and then he circles around this E minor in the beginning, and then he finally gets to this D major here. So there's a great tension, and then it drops down to the D major. You can really feel that difference right there. D major. Okay, did he mean this? Probably not. It was an anachronism for his time, but he was probably hearing wonderful sounds that he did not want to stop making. Related to tonal relationships and tension, relaxation, levels of activity, modulation, dissonance, frequency. Okay, so this is my harmony part, movement in harmony. Yes, extreme chromaticism throughout, creating dissonances, resulting in each of the soprano, alto, and tenor bass voices, alternating the feeling of tension and relaxation. I think right away, the first place where I really felt the tension is right in this area here. So I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go blue now. This was like the first place where there was real tension, like this tension here. So and then the relaxation, and then each place Vicentino takes us through, he gives us, I think he teases us with this modulation place here where we feel intense, we feel the tension here, and then we get this relaxation in this modulation. It's like, okay, so and we move on, and it happens in other places too. So for instance, I'm not going to say that it happens in this area because it's consistent all the way through from the end over to here. So, but it does happen in this area here. And again, we feel a little bit of it here. So there's some dissonance that happens, and then we have a little relaxation. Related to the melody, the soprano and tenor alternating as a stronger melody are evidenced in high peaks in soprano and lower underpoints in the tenor. So the tenor actually has higher notes than the soprano, than the alto, which is kind of interesting. Let me see. So here we are. I keep coming back to this place here because I'm looking for the high note with the soprano voice, which she does get to, but where did it go? Oh, let me see. Okay. So we have these places where the soprano is singing the high notes here. The tenor is singing the high notes here, but then we hear these low notes that he sings. And then moving forward against the, let me see, where did it go? I lost it. Oh, there it is. There's my strong soprano lead. It's measure 30. Sorry, Dr. Schubert. So we have this strong soprano lead happening right here, and yet we have the tenor who's way down here. We know that's the tenor, but so I feel like there's a real differentiating part between the soprano and the tenor. And of course the bass. The bass is really carrying those underpoints down below, and then he continues up. He has an interesting part, I think, because he too he's chromatic as well, and he's elongating most of the time, prolongating the notation of the notes. So we have a mixture of diatonic and chromatic movement that build to the alternating peaks. So I feel like in every phrase we get some kind of a peak. So, I changed the color. Mm-hmm. So we get like peak, and then alla brave, alla brave, alla brave, and then into this area here, the tension is growing, so we get more peak, more peak. I definitely feel like there's a peak through here because we're climbing in the sound. I think that by the soprano lead here, we get a nice peak happening here. She's very strong. She gets a very nice, I say she because I'm supposing it's a female that's singing this she. But by the time we get to phrase 6, we start to see the peaks. And that's just one little last peak before we go to the end. Let me see. I hope you have a nice cup of coffee while you're listening to me talk. I spoke about the modulations, and the modulations, they appear on the downbeats again. They appear on the downbeats. So here, nice modulation. Everywhere we look, it's taking us to where he takes us to something that seems like a modulation. Chord change. We don't want to say chord change, do we? But he does it, and you're not expecting it. So interestingly, I think that it does strengthen the entrance of the voice parts at the entrances, though. So whenever we've got this change here from here to here, it creates a nice strong entrance that we're not expecting, and then there's a little bit of a relaxation as we move on to the next section, next chord, next voices. I keep saying chord, and I know that's probably not correct, but as I'm reading it in my time. But one of the things that I found interesting, there's only 5 measures with notes that are smaller than whole notes or half notes. I'm going to change my color so that I can point those out. Let's see what color. How about this color? So we have it happening here in this section. Here in this section. So it's only, 1, 2, 3, a little bit here, a little bit here. See, very, very few measures. I counted 5, but I think there's actually 6, but smaller than half notes or whole notes. So it does give a tiny little bit of extra movement there. Overall, I'm saying that there's consonancy, I love this word, of the elements in the intensity that is driven by which voice is leading a stronger melody line. There are shades of imitation. Oh, my shades of imitation. Here we go. I'm going to change the color of this for this part. No, not yellow. That's not a good idea. Let's do something here. So there are shades of imitation. Suzanne's going to put the green in this area here. And there's a little bit of a canon effect. Il breve, il breve, il breve, il breve. And then if we move forward, I marked out more shades of imitation. Shades of imitation. Oh, you know what? That really deserves a nice green line. Shades of imitation. There we go. So we have these areas where he just goes que piange, que piange, que piange. And then over here, que piange, and it begins again. Shades of imitation. Is there such a thing as shades of imitation? A touch of imitation? Oh my goodness. Okay. So, I believe, let me see what else I put. The triadic holds that occur at phrase endings and beginnings. Yes. There are triadic holds that occur at phrase endings and beginnings. So yes, triadic holds. They come at the phrase endings and beginnings, which you can go right back to the very beginning. And so here he is right here. We start with a G major right there. And he immediately takes us to a G minor right there. And so these triadic holds are effective because they make us think, they make us feel like it's, or sound like it could be, he's going for the triad. Definitely cutting edge in his time. And so, and at the end of, like, again, with the triads here, again with the triads, looking for that, regardless of whether he's trying to make triads or not, like chords or not, he does. He is accidental. Maybe it's accidental. Haha, no pun intended with the accidental. But it's, again, here he is. He's making these triadic holds that then release onto the next change. Although I know that this is not at the beginning. Well, yeah, they are. They are at the beginning beat, and the second one is not, the first beat. So it does vary, but he does give us moments of relaxation. So, okay, to the small dimensions. I'm sorry if you're getting dizzy by me going up and down on the page. I wish it was left to right, but I can't make that work. So I don't even know if it does work. So middle to small dimensions. So I wrote about how each, let's change the color for this, shall we? Brown. How about brown? Each phrase begins at a contrasting point due to the use of chromaticism. So wherever we are, his phrasing, there is some sort of chromaticism happening. Each phrase has some sort of chromaticism that's happening as it begins. And then they gradually get punctuated by the chromaticism. So and you can see that immediately, like in these places right here. The chromaticism happens. I mean, that's a double F sharp. Again, who wants to sing a double F sharp? But whatever. And so you can see each of the phrases. Here we are in phrase 2. Phrase 2, we see that it's punctuated by this chromaticism that happens right away, right here. Same thing. Phrase 3 is not so chromatic. Maybe it's because he was trying to make the voices sing together, like the soprano. Soprano. Let's put it brown. Soprano and the alto and the tenor and the bass. So here, he probably didn't make it so chromatic because he was trying to give them, make them sound like they were singing a harmony rather than being so disjointed and dissonance. So even here, however, we do come back to his, the chromaticism here, where he carries on through the phrasing. Everyone else, all other phrases now are very chromatic. So he gave us a kind of a little bit of a relaxation period right there in the beginning. Let me see. So where am I now? And now each phrase has a sectional contrast. The thematic texture is gradually punctuated with sudden ascensions and descensions that immediately create harsh timbres to the unexpecting ear. Yes. So, unexpecting ear. That means maybe the person who's listened to Palestrina and now, I mean, unless they got to listen to Gesualdo, they're now listening to this and they're going, oh my gosh, they didn't expect it. But like I said, after you listen to it for quite a while, all of a sudden that does not seem like it doesn't seem so harsh to the ear. So, okay, I'm going to go on about the harmonic vocabulary. So the harmonic vocabulary is based upon three genera: the diatonic, the enharmonic, and the chromatic. Okay, we can write that in here, right? Diatonic. Oh, don't want to do that. Maybe right in there. Diatonic, enharmonic. He's covering all the bases. Chromatic. All right. So, while pieces dance around the Dorian mode, is not truly in the mode because of all the sharps and flats. I know that I said that before, but I'm continuing. So there's no ficta in the usual understanding. There are no cadences per se, so there's no strong 5/1s, no strong 4/1s. I don't even think that he comes to a 1, except at the very, very end, where he is true to the 1, where he ends on that D major. So, maybe he's not. He's in D, definitely in D. He was in D that day when he wrote that. So, the note against note counterpoint, he effectively sets up the dissonances at almost every beat change. There's something. No, there are chordal changes that occur naturally with the chromatic changes. So again, maybe he wasn't trying to make chordal changes, but they happened accidentally. Again with the accidentally. So his vocabulary, steps and skips and leaps. No skips, no leaps. But I did not observe any skips in either of the voices. Each voice moves carefully, stepwise. You can see. What color would you like now? What this nice color? That's a nice color. So everything is stepwise, whether it's down or up, down, down. Actually, not even down. It's an enharmonic. Down. So everything is stepwise. He's very, very careful. Yeah. That might be one of the few leaps. But that would be an anomaly in this piece because everything else is very, very close. Very, very close. Stepwise motion. You can see all the way through here. Looking at all the parts. There's a leap. So no, he did keep a very tight rein on what was stepwise and what was leap. Very few leaps. Very few. Very few. Mostly stepwise. Narrow contour. There's narrow contour waves in each voice. And so what I mean by that is, Okay, find a new color. I don't know if there's actually enough colors here. Oh, I found some more colors. Yay! I found some more colors. Okay. Here's a new color. I like this color. Okay. So it's good color for the water. So I feel like, you know, if we look at this, we see these very tight contour waves. So I'm going to draw the waves. Just look at the waves. They're not wide. They're not wide in any of the voices. So I'm like thinking when you do the waves, well, there's a little bit of a dip right there, but no. So the contour, very tight. When you listen to it, you'll find, again, as I was saying, so if you look at that, not very wide on the contour waves. Very, very tight. Very tight. This one might be the widest. But you can see, if you look at the voice, the tenor voice is singing in a higher range than the alto. Oh, okay. Anyway, I move on. So I'm in the rhythm section now. So it's gradual chromatic punctuation. I feel like the chromaticism of it creates its own rhythm in the line, especially in a place like this where it's everything is moving chromatically. You can see how that would create a rhythm, and he does that throughout. And I think that he drives the internal rhythm by the pairing of the voices. Again, I'm going to change colors now. These pairing of the voices that we see here and here, mostly soloistic in the beginning. Then he pairs these voices here and here. And he does it throughout by pairing those voices. However, when he gets to the section, where's that section? The sad, griefy section. Here, it's not paired anymore. It's very soloistic here at this place right here. So he doesn't let us. It doesn't sound as punctuated rhythmically by the chromatics because the voices aren't paired. Although they can sound, because they're soloistic, it can be a little bit rhythmic punctuation, but I think because they sing it in a legato fashion, it's not as front and center, not as in your face. So okay, let me see. I'll continue with the growth. This is the final part of this section. I am saying that this piece begins and continues with contrasts without recurrence of phrases. Each voice stands alone in its originality, but melds with the other voices to make a new language paragraph. And I stand by that. So, except for the places where he has the pairing of the voices, there are no phrasal repetition. There's no place where they come back and sing a section again. It's all it's strophic. There's no, they don't come back and sing a part again. Just from through their verses, the textual verses. Okay, I'm at middle to small dimensions in the movement. So, okay, do I need to change my color? I think I need to change my color. Let's change the color. I'm going to get a pointy stick here. I'm so happy to find that you can actually change the colors. How about this green? Here we go. So, all right. From phrase 1 to phrase 2, so back again at phrase 1 to phrase 2, it builds to a peak. So our peak is right in here. From phrase 3 to phrase 4, this is phrase 4. It's not very dark, is it? Is another peak. We get to a peak in here. That tension brings us to that peak. She's singing those notes, building that tension. From phrase 6, through to measure 40. So from all the way from here, phrase 6, through to measure 40. This is Friday. We have some tension, we have build, we have high notes that are coming in until we are eventually starting to take our descent into where we land at the end at this beautiful D chord. So again, he uses the technique of holding all the voices throughout, and on the first beat of measure 7, we see that. So this is the first place that he does it, and then I list other places. Phrase 2 at measure 19. There's phrase 2 at measure 19. He does it here. Phrase 4. Where did my phrase 4 go? I'm sorry. Phrase 2 at measure 19. I did that, didn't I? Did I get that wrong? I think I got that wrong. Nope. Phrase 2 at measure 19. There we go. And I think that let's see, did I do that right? Yep. That was phrase 3 at measure 19. Okay, so this is where phrase 4 starts right here. And at phrase 4, there's another peak. Phrase 3 and phrase 4, we have peaks. At phrase 6, through to measure 40, there's a descent. There's definitely a peak towards the end, but then, so phrase 6, we see this peak, and then it just descends. So I know that sounds redundant from what I just said in the last part, but I reset it in a different way. So I'm in the melody now. The direction of the melody ascends, gathering tension. This is a messy mess to look at right now, isn't it? So it does gather tension, and we have seen that in several places. So starting with this area here, recap. I'm sorry, it ascends, gathering the tension. So here we have an ascension, gathering the tension. Definitely in this place we have ascension, gathering tension, and it's actually in the soprano and the tenor, and a little bit in the bass. The alto section is not ascending, but they're descending. Notes against notes creates a tension as well. Let's see. So we have interval tension that's created at the diminished triads in phrase 4 at measure 20. So this whole section, we get interval tension by these changes that just go up and up and up and up and up and up in that jazzy way to this jazzy chord that he doesn't even know that he made. Herbie Hancock would have loved it. They would have been good friends, I think. In my rhythm section now, I'm in a middle to small, and this, of course, is movement. The pairing seen in rhythmic shape section creates the rhythmic contour as the various pairings of the voices are either singing prolongated notes, while the outstanding voice will have a more swift chromatic movement, locking in triads along the way. Every time they lock in the triads. So locking in those triads. And starting from the end, we'll go backwards now. Where do they lock in the triads? Look at each time these triads are locked in. Of course, here we know that. Triadic movement here, triadic lock and hold, triadic lock and hold. Here we have, he is just in this section here, we have a little bit of a momentary triadic hold as he's moving into this next section. Finally, there is evidence of stretto or slight imitation? Yes, evidence of stretto. I'm going to go back to our beginning here. This is I'm calling it the canon effect, although it's not true canon, but it would we could classify it as stretto. He's got these areas where he's just repeating in the voices. So together with the tenor and the bass, the soprano and the alto, and then all voices in. And then further, as I said before, shades of imitation in here. So and it starts, we see it here, 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 here. So you've got bits of imitation that are happening. Similarly, this one starts here. It's going to here. Here we go, here. Here we go, here. So it's rampant in this area right here. Can we say rampant? Did LaRue say rampant? I think that there is a rhythmic lift as a result of the end of phrase 4 into phrase 5. I'm going back to phrase 4. I'm going to make this one darker so we can see it, because it's really hard to read. Phrase 4. There we go. So from phrase 4 here to phrase 5, through to phrase 5, there's a rhythmic lift that happens. And it's kind of an interesting one too, because the tenor sings this line right here, and he sings, where did he go? So he carries that line down there, and then you hear a little bit of a kind of a, I don't want to say echo, but rhythmically it's a little bit of an echo, I guess, repeating that same rhythm. And I'm almost done. Your coffee's probably almost done. So my harmony, I talked about strong chordal changes at the beat changes, perhaps an unplanned anachronism of the time. The triadic changes are stable and create tension as each one is sounded, but there is a moment of instability as the shift into the next chromatic triad commences. Dissonances abound in this piece. There's some harshness, grinding, but multiple listenings take away the grinding, to be honest. It's like if you listen to it, you start to begin to hear and look forward to the changes, and it's not so unsettling. There's shifting that happens from chordal changes, such as the shifting that goes in phrase 2. Here we are at phrase 2. As we shift into this A flat, another place where he does an immediate shifting is at phrase 4 at measure 19. Elusive measure 19. So what happens here is he shifts into a D major. This whole section right here. Into a D major. We hear a real fifth that's happening in this section as well. Oh, go away. We don't want you. And then, of course, that right here in this one, I say that there's a final, well, after going through all these changes, these various changes that he does, which are really interesting to the ear to hear, he lands at what I would only call as a C major 7 first inversion. Very, very jazzy, totally jazzy. So whenever the harmony is slowed, I mean slowed by the notational value, it does feel a little bit like it's like the tempo is slowed. So that prolongated slowing is, he uses it effectively in this area, in the grief area, in the grief section. I think that's where he really uses his prolongated slowing. And finally, but not finally, so I think that each phrase has its own character, and through the extreme chromatic movement, each voice has its own color, own flavor, and I think that it's very tight and densely orchestrated. I'm saying orchestrated now like he orchestrated this for voices, but in actuality I guess he did. But so it's so tight, and it's very dense. He seems to keep the voices in a very tight voicings, and it's probably due to the fact that he was May was playing these on his archicembalo, his instrument that he created, his chromatic instrument. And I also feel like there was a great deal of power and weight that would be gathered, that was, I would say, visually I see this as like metacrucic and anacrucic moments. He really gathered the weight and dropped it into the next beat, next triadic moment. So, and now I'm going to take you to the video. I'm going to continue into my video, and I hope you enjoyed my analysis of Nicola Vicentino's Madonna il Poco Dolce. I was so excited to find this piece and be able to work on this piece. And it's very helpful for my project, and I will be adding it to the repertoire for my choral master's recital. So there we go.